Hello, dear travelers, and welcome back to another episode of the Travelcast. Today, I have really inspiring guest, Douglas, the person who taken traveling to totally another level. He's traveling all around the globe by single gear bicycle, and really just by single gear bicycle. So, Douglas, I think I would like to give you a word a little bit. Can you please introduce yourself and you know?
All right.
Share the emotion, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I just this year I got back from attempting a Guinness World Record for circumnavigation around the world, 29,000 kilometers, averaging 161 kilometers per day across six continents. Um, and uh, and I did that on a single speed bicycle, a one gear with self-supported, so carrying all my equipment, food, clothing, shelter, um, and yeah, and we did it to also raise money for Medicine Sans Fronteras, or Doctors Without Borders, to
Hmm.
support those very brave men and women who are helping our fellow human beings. So we also raised a lot of money for them, and it all went to their organization. So yeah, I got back on March 1st, back to my beautiful home of Hawaii, successful, not without a lot of beauty and pain throughout the world. But luckily I got back and just resting and rebuilding after a very intense journey.
Hmm. So, firstly, congratulations, right? So you got your record. You have a record officially written in this in the Guinness Book, right? And you mentioned about like so you have like all the total 25,000 kilometers. So like definitely all the globe, definitely different continents. Uh, Coming back to your beginning,
Mhm.
how it all started? Like, how did you decide again this kind of way of, I don't know if I can call it travel or it's a mission, you know?
Mm.
So how it all begin and when it begin?
Yeah, so I did realize in this ride that I had done something a little unusual, which was to take what is normally described as cycle touring,
Mm.
when you go on these long distance trips where you immerse yourself in culture and nature. And I took that activity and I turned it into a personal race. I made it kind of a competition. And that there are people that do that. That's kind of these Guinness World Records. But normally people get on a bike for these long distance experiences to kind of be to for culture and for nature. Um, but my motivation to turn it into a type of competition was to be able to get attention from others. And the reason for that is because all my rides have always been connected to a charity. I always wanted to raise money for various organizations. And so to do that, I thought that maybe if I showed them a little suffering, if I showed them a little pain, and they would be more sympathetic to donate money to the charity. It wasn't just me having a good time traveling the world, but it was me really struggling. And then maybe I could kind of touch their heart and they would, and then when I asked them to donate to other people who are struggling in the world, that they would. Um, so that's kind of how it started. Um, it started mostly to raise money for charities, and then deciding to make touring into a kind of a competition. And then I kept increasing the level of competition. The first ride, this world record was the third ride that I've long distance ride that I've done. The first one was crossing the United States. That was the first time I did this. It was in 2016, and I cycled about 7,000 kilometers from Los Angeles, California, back to New York City on a single gear bicycle, self supported. And I did that to raise money for a US organization called the March of Dimes that helps children. that have illnesses. Um, and so I did that. I was very overwhelmed. I had no idea what I was doing. I had never cycled long distances. I had never gone camping or lived out in nature. And luckily, I somehow made it because I had to cross the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian across Death Valley. And I was so unprepared. It's kind of the naive is bliss. I was so ignorant that I thought I could do something like cycling, 160 kilometers a day on one gear. And it was insane. But I did it. We raised money for this charity, and that was supposed to be done. And then fast forward in 2020, the pandemic happened. And by then, I was already back to my usual life of study and teaching at the university. But the pandemic put everything to a halt. And so I decided I wasn't going to teach remotely, like through the computer screen, because I just didn't like that. So I said, I'll take a year off and wait for the pandemic to for something to happen, the vaccine. And during that year, I started to brainstorm, well, what do I do with my life? What is there, you know, and that's when I decided, well, I really enjoyed that cycling across the US 4 years ago. So maybe I can do it again, but do it bigger. So this time, I'm going to circumnavigate the European continent, which would be 24 countries and about 12,000 kilometers, again on a single gear, self supported. And I would raise money for the World Food Program as part of the United Nations. And it's also an organization I really cared about deeply. And so I then on 2022, I embarked on that journey. I completed that successfully. And halfway through that European trip, I had in my mind that I could do something even bigger. So when I got back to Hawaii, I took about 3 months and I started planning the adjustments to do the world record. And that had me cross 6 continents and 29,000 kilometers for Doctors Without Borders. So these were three organizations that I really cared about, that I
Mm-hmm.
believed in, and I wanted to raise money for. And the cycling was a way to do that, and also to experience the world and nature and people along the way, and to explore myself and my own potential physically and mentally. Um, so that's kind of how it kind of evolved from a country to a continent to a world record, and various charities.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And all being said, it was all the time same bicycle, just or like
Yeah,
you upgrade yourself somehow.
yeah. There's not much you can do with a steel. It's just a steel single gear bicycle. So there's not much you can upgrade, but every little advantage helps. So if I just got a more comfortable seat, or if I got more comfortable padding on the handlebars. I mean, when you're doing that, on the bicycle 10, 12 hours every single day, nonstop, yeah, little adjustments go a long way. And I learned a lot on each trip, including the world record trip, on how to make small modifications to just make the experience survivable. But overall, like, you wouldn't see a difference. On all three rides, it's a black steel bike with one gear. The only nice thing about it is that, unlike a lot of cycle tourists who are doing like what I did, crossing deserts in Africa and frozen mountains in Europe, like they will experience a lot of time mechanical failures because they have more advanced technological equipment that's more delicate. And when it's exposed to the harshness of nature, the dust, the sand, the mud, the ice, things will break very easily on their more delicate equipment. With me, nothing could break. It's just a chain and a piece of metal. And so, luckily, I was never like stranded in the middle of an African desert going, oh no, this little piece broke and I have to wait 2 weeks for them to ship it in. I saw all this on YouTube from other cycle tourists. They would
Mhm.
get stuck in the middle of nowhere because of one little bitty piece. In my case, nothing broke. The bicycle, though, did get crashed several times, And in Indonesia, in Africa, in Argentina, I needed to find a welder to just weld steel plates onto the metal because it broke the frame. But luckily with steel, they just like put just slapped pieces of metal and just burned it, and it just my bike looked like a Frankenstein bike of like metal wells because
Yeah.
the bike did literally break in half in several places. And but luckily that's all you needed to do was just keep adding more metal to it, and
It's
it
like
would
Max
survive.
thing, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
but on bicycle.
you can't do that with carbon fiber or some really delicate material, but with metal you just add more metal and keep
All
going.
right, then it's like makes sense because today while I was also preparing and checking your last links on Instagram,
Hmm.
and you have a link with bicycle, with the gear, and not the gear. I think it's all everything what you have, and by weight
Yeah.
and by scale, and I was surprised. Like, and you when you put there was like 13 kilograms of bike. I was like, his bike that heavy because other thing it was like really quite light, and I was kind of a
Hmm.
little bit confused. Maybe like metric system was like miscalculated or something. But now when you say steel, it totally makes sense for me.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah, yes,
and actually
please.
my bike, while it is a simple steel bike, it's actually a really nice company that
Mm,
that makes this bike. It's called Wabi, and they use a really high grade steel that makes it just as strong but lighter. So for steel
mm,
bikes, my bike is actually very light for steel. It's
okay,
not light for everything other material, but for steel, it's quite light and
all
still
right.
has the strength that is good for traveling long distances. In fact, most people believe that if you're going to cycle tour, maybe not doing like a race like me, but if you're going to cycle across a country or continent, that you use steel. Most That's usually the standard. It feels better on the road. It can withstand a lot more abuse, and it's easier to fix if something breaks. So most cycle tourists use steel anyways, and and then the trade off is the weight, but it's not the Tour de France. So
Yeah,
unless you're doing what I'm doing, then it kind of is. But yeah, yeah, it's mostly steel.
nice, nice. Well, like let's maybe touch a little bit this moment with like such experiences you man. Like I don't even know what the level of this experience is, like God level of experience. Anyway, can you go again from experience of cycling, traveling? Because again, you was camping, you was having a winter
Mm,
time, you was having super hot summer time, tropics, exotic, everything, everything. So. All this picture, like how would you say, like what people not necessarily for record, but let's say for themselves when they want to go to bike trip, what they
mm,
should pay attention, what they should take, what they should not take, because it's really waste of your weight and
mm.
like time and so on.
Yeah,
So yeah, like everything, like from the luggage till the bike itself. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great. So I've
supplies also.
always
Yes, sorry. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so the most general piece of advice, and that's for survival, I would say, is having experienced, like, yes, extreme heat, 45-degree African deserts alone, or negative 20-degree, up in when I was there this last December in Poland and Germany, it's like it was snow. It snowed in December, the beginning of December. There was that big snow, and I was right there in the middle of the snowstorms. It was so for these two things. So on the most extreme, there are two things you need to survive for extreme heat and cold. For heat, you more than the one thing you need is water. You need enough water. If you have water, you'll survive. You won't die. Everything else will be terribly miserable, but without water, you will die. Everything else is whatever. For the extreme cold, you need clothes that will keep you warm and dry. You don't even need water. In fact, I could barely drink water because my water bottles turned into ice bricks. And even if I was thirsty, I couldn't have it. But you don't sweat water in extreme cold. So you really need just a little bit to
Mm-hmm.
because your body retains it all. Um, So in extreme heat, you need water. I carried like 8 liters of water that I drank the entire thing and still was dehydrated to cross deserts. But if you had water, you don't even need food. You need nothing else. You need water. And then in the heat, in the cold, you need that clothes that keep you dry and warm because if not, you're going to freeze to death. And there you don't need water either. And in fact, in both extremes, you barely even need food, to be honest. What's everything else? Like if we're going to talk, you need a cell phone with a Bluetooth speaker. I mean, I guess, but for what I was doing, it was about performance. Like, could I cycle this 160 plus kilometer per day? And because of the one gear bicycle, I had limited technology. I couldn't change gears and carry
Hmm.
more weight. So I had to strip down to the barest essential to make it as easy as possible. Um, so, so other than that, I mean, it's to each, it really is a personal decision. I mean, first of all, if they're not trying to perform like I did and more about enjoy the experience, and maybe they want to do 50 to 80 kilometers a day, they want to cycle half the day and then spend the other half just like camping and relaxing. Well, you can carry a lot more stuff. You could carry books, you could carry a Kindle, you could carry a music. You could carry a full laptop so you could do all your video editing while you're chilling half the day to document the cycling trip. You could carry a bigger tent so that you just have more room inside your tent. Even if it's just you could carry a two-person tent or a three-person tent. It only adds like 30% more weight. So it's not like two-person tent is double the weight of a one-person tent. That's not true. It's only like 30% more, but it has double the volume inside. So you're then more comfortable if it's raining. You have more room to put your stuff and relax and stretch out. Um, so I might be the wrong person I'm be very militaristic and things, but to ask that I would be like, you need water and heat and clothes and that's it. It's maybe I'm not the best person, but this also does align with something we had talked about right before the meeting, which is my desire to live a minimalist life, and that
Hmm.
the less things I had, the less things I had to worry about, about maintaining, about losing, about getting stolen, about my appearance to others. All of this I became free of the less and less that I had. And I could just then focus on my health, on nature, on my personal relationships, and not have to worry about all those things, the responsibilities that come with having more and more material things. So for several reasons, when it comes to equipment and things, I stripped everything down to the bare minimum, for performance sake and also for kind of almost like a spiritual reason. Um, One other thing I would say about a more minimalist take, uh, is also a psychological one. When I'm cycling and I only have this one gear,
Hmm.
I'm very connected to the environment, the nature that I'm surrounded by, in the sense that when you have technology, like say you're more and more technology, it removes you from nature, and it means that you avoid making learning lessons that nature has to teach. So, for example, if you're driving in a car and you're going down the road and it's really hot, well, you can close the windows and turn on the air conditioning. Or if it starts raining, you can cover the windows and turn on the heat. And that makes you more comfortable, and that's fine. But what it does do is it separates you from the nature. And why is that maybe a problem? Is because nature has very valuable things to teach, and in very basic ways, but meaningful ways. And that's impermanence, that everything is changing, and interconnectedness, that everything is connected. And when we remove ourselves from nature, we don't get that lesson. So, for instance, when I'm on the bicycle, or when anybody's on a bicycle, what happens when it gets really hot or it gets colder, it starts raining, is you can't roll up the windows and turn on the air conditioner and the heat. So you can't have this controlled environment ecosystem that is never changing, that is permanent. And so instead, you're out there and the heat burns your skin and it makes you sweat, or the cold shakes you to the bones. As uncomfortable as that is, it's also teaching you a valuable lesson. It teaches you that you are connected to your environment and that the environment is, in fact, always changing. And that teaches you how to live a way of life where you accept that nothing is permanent because you were so viscerally connected to it when nature was beating you up about it. And that lesson, I think, is very important because then it carries on to the way you live your life. Like there's something very basic like the sun or the cold beating you up and teaching you that nothing is permanent, that everything is changing and everything's connected. You then go home and then say you're there with your family and you're having a conversation and you have a disagreement. And you're like, oh, this person doesn't understand me, and you want to get upset. But then you kind of realize this lesson. No, everything changes. Everything's impermanent. It's okay. I'm having this disagreement with my loved one, but everything changes. One day we will overcome this and we will have harmony or peace. So let me let go of this moment because it's not permanent. Um, and the less technology you have, the more connected the more you learn these lessons. So my decision to do a single gear as opposed to just a bicycle with like 20 gears or something also even gets me more intimately connected to these ideas, because when I'm like approaching a mountain and I look at this giant mountain, immediately somebody with a proper bicycle with a lot of gears will immediately start to strategize in their head. Okay, I'm approaching the mountain, the elevation is changing. What gear is my optimal gear? How do I switch? Switch, change to find the perfect strategy to overcome this change. Instead, with me, I don't have a choice. The mountain comes and I say, there's nothing to do but just to pedal, just push harder. And so as I'm climbing, physiologically, my body changes. Suddenly, my heart races. It feels like it's going to explode through my chest. My body starts to perspire. And now I'm understanding in connectedness. That when the environment changes, like the mountain comes, my body changes and everything is connected. As soon as I overcome the mountain, and I start flying down, the wind cools my skin and dries it. My heart rate drops to nothing. So every change is, the less technology you have, the more you are exposed to change and connectedness that nature teaches you, and that lesson is really valuable. So in fact, I think the best way to experience it is not even on a bicycle, it's walking. Grab a backpack and just
Hmm.
start walking down the road. Go cross for 10 years, just walk with a backpack. There is even less technology, which means you will be connected to nature even more, and you will understand these two valuable lessons of impermanence and interconnectedness. Everything is change and everything is connected. So, yeah. Okay, so that's that.
Cool,
But
man. Like,
I'm gonna
yeah.
download my philosophy on you. But it is what it is.
Well, that's
So
perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, I actually would like to go to this direction as well.
mm,
Just wanted to a little bit ask just some small question about
yes, please.
two things about water and about the let's say waterproof warm things. Yeah, um, just practical, just like question. So to water, should it be any I don't know, like some vitamins? Is it like in pills or something? Like, should you like as your recommendation? Is it
Mm,
like worth to bring like package of like vitamins, or
mm,
I don't really remember this word, isotonics or like something like this, but
mm,
something, I don't know, like some minerals, something what will also help the body to deliver something
mm.
more than just water. Is it, in
Yeah,
your
yeah,
opinion, must have, or like
yeah. The for they have what they call electrolytes. So it'll be
electrolytes?
these.
Oh, this
Yeah,
one I was, yeah, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes, yes.
and you'll find them in sports drinks. They're a combination of, I think, like anywhere like up to six different kind of minerals,
Mm-hmm.
plus salt. And what it does is, yeah, it helps your body retain water so that you don't. And yeah, it's essential for performance. So absolutely. Like I said, if one is taking a much shorter trip, like let's say a weekend uh, on the bike, or maybe even a country, like it might take 2 weeks. I think you can carry these electrolyte pills. You might even carry a multivitamin, just a generic multivitamin, because it'll just have a little bit of everything. And yeah, and it doesn't occupy too much space. I keep everything in zip and plastic, bags. I don't
Mhm.
carry any special waterproof bags or anything. It's just a bunch of little bags, and you can put your toiletries in it, and you can put medicine in it. You can do this. So yeah, you could do that, and it won't carry much. For my case, for like my world record, it was 9 months and the 6 continents. That would require too much. That would be kilos of pills
Okay. Okay.
to then take. Also, in certain stages or continents like Africa, you couldn't even find those pills if you wanted to, because uh, like Africa for me was the most inspiring place out of all the continents. The people were just great, and the landscapes were beautiful. The burning fires, sunrises, and sunsets were just spectacular, and the people, like the best people, the kindest, honest, wonderful people. But so having said that, though, all the countries are very poor, and so the lack of food and nutrition made that stage the hardest of all the stages, in combinations to the harsh climates and the lack of infrastructure. But there you could barely get any food. So normally you need to consume quite a bit of protein so that it can rebuild your muscles as you're breaking them down, especially if you're doing something like a lot of mileage. But in Africa, I was living many, many weeks off just bread, if I could find it, which has very little protein, and water was even hard to find. So I definitely couldn't find something like electrolytes and things like that.
Indeed.
In Africa, I was really struggling, and I crossed paths with a doctor from South Africa, and she gave me a mixture that I could make on my own. She said you put 1 part salt and 6 parts sugar. This ratio into water. This will be like a Gatorade or like a sports drink. And I was actually surprised. I said, that much sugar? And she goes, yeah. She goes, the sugar actually is what allows the blood to absorb the salt. And that's why like sports drinks have a lot of sugar in them, actually. I thought they just had sugar for taste, just to hook you.
Wow, I didn't know this. Okay, keep going
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah, I thought
Interesting.
that's the only reason they had a lot of sugar, but they don't. They have sugar because it's necessary to absorb the minerals.
All
So,
right.
so 1 part, 6 parts. So if you're doing extreme survival cycling or walking, and you're in very poor areas, then you can make your own cocktail of 6 to 1. And sure, you can find sugar and salt. They're so basic, but even in very poor places like Africa and stuff, you don't take anything for granted. You're lucky if you get bread to put in your mouth, and something like salt and sugar to put in your water, and then you just keep pushing. Um, but if you're like, yeah, cycling Europe, Asia, North America, if you want to do that, sure, fine. Go to a sports store, go to a pharmacy, say I'd like some electrolytes, a multivitamin. And also another thing you might think about carrying is a small bag of protein or protein bars, because they're very portable. They can, and you can quickly consume that necessary protein to rebuild the muscles you're breaking down so that they can, push the next day. So I would even
Mm-hmm.
say, bring some protein bars. If you're cycling in cooler weather, the protein bars will not melt. And so they're very nice. You can and because they're easy cleanup, you just eat it, and then all you have is a wrapper to throw away. If you bring protein powder, well, you have to put that in a container, shake it, drink it, but now you have a dirty container you have to clean. And sometimes if you're out in the country, in the wilderness, Yeah, finding water to clean is more of a challenge, So the protein bar, you just have a little wrapper you can just keep until you can find trash. But that will be harder in hot climates because when you open that thing, it's got chocolate on it and stuff. It's going to be a mess. So then maybe powder is better. And those
Yeah.
things can be very easy, right, to find at a pharmacy or health store. And you can stay really, really healthy with, yeah, electrolytes, some protein powder or bars, and a multivitamin. You're probably doing more than a lot of cycle tourists. The way I see cycle tourists, they don't do that. They're just like, I just eat pasta and rice and that's it. I'm like, no protein, no electrolytes, and they always talk about I lost so much weight, like I became so skinny, and they blame it on the cycling, but it's not. It's the nutrition, and they're just not educated. I was cycling 12 hours a day, 160 miles, and I lost very little weight. But unless I was in Africa or in South America, there I lost weight because of the lack of access to good food. But when I got like to Europe, I'm just eating sausage from the grocery store nonstop, like fouette. I eat like 1,000,000 pounds of fouette. I'm just like fouette, sausage, bread, cheese, and yeah, and then I'm bulking up for when I get to South America or bulking up after Africa. So yeah, I think those three simple things, and you would be doing better than most cycle tourists. Just take a couple electrolytes, a multivitamin, and a protein, something every day, and then the rest you can find whatever you find available wherever, whatever continent you're on. Southeast Asia has great food for cheap. Europe has great food. You'll find your food all over the world.
Mhm. Well, and moving forward with
Mm.
well, man. Again, all your trips. It's like as you also mentioned, these physical and mental, let's say, challenges, or like in general, it's tough moments. Like, do you have? Definitely, you have. Like, would you like to share
Mm.
some of your toughness moment? Like, if you remember some, both like physical and mental, and how did you cross through it?
Yeah. There was plenty. Not on the US trip, aside from Death Valley, and in the Europe trip, aside from some cold at the end of it. Uh, they were safe and fine. The world trip really pushed me. I Yeah, there were many things to overcome. I got COVID twice, once in Southeast Asia and once in Europe. I had food poisoning twice, once in Southeast Asia and once in Africa. I had three accidents with cars, one in Indonesia, one in Botswana. I'm sorry, one in Indonesia, one in Buenos Aires, and then one in the United States. Um, in all these cases, because of the nature of the Guinness World Record, requirements are that you cannot stop for more than, I think, a week, or it disqualifies the trip. So say for in Indonesia, I both got food poisoning, and I was involved in an accident with a truck that left a hairline fracture in my knee. So the knee had a crack. Um, in both those cases, I stopped for only 2 days and I had to keep going. So with the food poisoning, it meant that I cycled for 10 days and then stopping on the side of the road every hour to throw up, and then just keep going because the food poisoning, it wouldn't let me hold any food, and
Mm-hmm.
so I just had to, and I was so weakened physically to keep doing the 160 per day. Um, but you had to keep going because if I stopped enough days, it would disqualify the trip. And plus, I had my goals because I wanted to finish this world record in 9 months. So, so yeah, it just meant you had to keep going. With the hairline fracture, this one broke my bike and cracked my knee. I still had to cycle that day, still another like I think 60 kilometers to the town that I was going to finish in, because I also, one of the requirements is you cannot get in any private transportation. You have to physically cross this 29,000 kilometers on your own. And you also cannot take public transportation unless you are crossing continents or across bodies of water. So so when I crashed in Indonesia with this truck, the truck wanted to give me a ride, the 60 kilometers to the town, and I couldn't accept it. So luckily the bicycle, yeah, and so I had to get on the bike, but thank God that it was cracked, but it would still move in a straight line. It could not turn or anything. And so I rode in just tears until for the 60 kilometers, the first thing I did was before going to the hospital was go to a welder. And I was like, please, please, God, fix my bicycle. And nobody spoke English. And I was like, please. And I went from a bicycle shop to another bicycle shop to finally a welder, to a place with just welders. And nobody could help me. No one could speak English. But when I got to the welder place, everyone's there, but there's this one young guy sitting, leaning against a wall, smoking a cigarette. And I just looked at him. He was so relaxed, so confident. And I go, he's the one to help me. Like, he's my savior. I feel it. Look at this guy. Everyone else is like, what happened? What happened? And this guy's just chilling. And I said, bike fix, please. And he goes, okay. And he fixed it. He like stuck all his metal on it and fixed it. Then I went to the hospital. They x-rayed it and they said, you have a fracture. They said, it's okay. You need to put it into a cast for like 4 weeks and then it will heal by itself, no surgery. And I said, I don't have 4 weeks. I have 2 days. I have to go. And they were like, well, we don't know. And so what to tell you? So what they did is they extracted blood out of it because it had swollen really big. So they extracted a lot of blood and then they gave me a bunch of painkillers. And then in 2 days, I hit the road and I kept going. And then for like 4 weeks, I took this really powerful painkillers that I was almost delusional the whole time I was cycling. For 4 weeks, I was like this, just kind of like, because,
Can you say it? Maybe your Guinness record will hear it and disqualify you for drugs, you know?
for my, no, painkillers, okay. Steroids, performance enhancing, no good.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
they did offer me that though too, steroids, and I said no. I said I think that's not fair. But the
Mhm.
painkiller, yeah, give me the painkiller. It hurts. And then so I cycled with painkillers, and when I got to Kazakhstan, the stage 3, I had to go to the hospital again for them to extract blood again because of the swelling. And then when I finished the painkillers, I actually said no more because I could get more around the world. But
Mhm.
I could feel it. It's kind of addictive. You really feel
Oh,
good.
really? You feel it even
Yeah,
this?
you
Nice.
feel good. Everything is like no problem. You feel so relaxed. And so I was like, I don't like that feeling. It's not natural. So I was like, no,
Yeah.
no more. And 4 weeks have passed. So I kept cycling. Same thing, the COVID, the food poisoning again. The COVID, the first time I didn't even feel that I had COVID. I was just tested in order to get a visa into Europe. But the first time I got COVID was terrible. I was coughing for like 2 weeks straight. It was just hacking, coughing, and I couldn't sleep. Like all night, I would wake myself every hour, just hacking, coughing. It was a nightmare, mostly because I couldn't sleep because I kept coughing myself awake. And I still, even with no sleep, cycle every day, 12 hours. So tired. Um, the accident in Botswana had left me scraped up, but no serious injury. In Argentina, a truck or van sideswiped me and like crashed me into the corner. I fell. I knocked myself out. I got a concussion. The driver took me to the local hospital. They were like, "You have a concussion. You have to be careful with your
Hmm.
head. You cannot fall." I had really bad headaches for about 3 days. It was just
Mm.
pounding headaches, but I kept cycling and just managing the pain, and then they went away. And then the last thing of all the injuries, and this doesn't even mention the extreme heat or the cold and the hunger that you had to overcome, but you had the illnesses and the injuries. But the last thing is when I got to stage 7, which was the United States, to cross North America, and this was the last stage. So, which means I had to overcome all that I described, all the heat, all the cold, all the hunger, all the illness, all the injury, all the pain. And I had made it to the final stage. And I'm in my country cycling. It's kind of like the final tour of the battlefield. I'm just going to cross the United States and go home with my victory. And 10 days before I was going to finish in Hawaii, a car ran over me in Texas, ran completely over me, and left me unconscious again underneath the car with the bicycle, with my head cut open, with my shoulder dislocated, and with my knee dislocated. And it was a complete catastrophe. I woke up on the side of the road in a stretcher with a neck cast, with the ambulances carrying me into the ambulance to the emergency room, where they then proceeded to put my head together and close it with staples and sutures. So they stapled my skull together. They had to remove fluid with these out of my brain because it was swelling and it could cause me to go into a coma or brain damage. And I was left just completely immobile on a stretcher, in just completely heartbroken because I wanted so bad to achieve this world record. And I knew when I left, like when I left Hawaii almost 9 months before, I knew that I was going to attempt something that no one had attempted, at least not officially on a record with evidence. I was going to be the first to attempt this, and I didn't know why that was possible, why someone my age, my average physical abilities could do something that no other person had achieved on record. And so I made a commitment to myself then. I said, this is going to be so hard that I need to get into the right mindset, which means I cannot allow myself an opportunity to quit or an escape plan. There is no
Mm.
plan B. So I prayed really, really hard for days before I left Hawaii. And I told myself, and I told Amy, my fiance, I said, there's only 3 ways that I come back to Hawaii. I either come back on my bicycle, in a wheelchair, or in a coffin. That's it. There's no other way I come back. I either come back victorious or crippled or dead. And that's the
Mhm.
only way this is going to happen. And I told myself that so much until I believed it. And so when I was crossing, yeah, those African deserts, those frozen mountains in Europe, when I was vomiting on the side of the road from food poisoning or COVID or my fractured knee, I never quit, even though I cried and I screamed and I was suffered so much. I never quit. And here I was at the final stage, 10 days left, 160 kilometers per day, and I was in my country, and it was going to and I had already proved to myself that I was willing to give everything and sacrifice everything and go through so much pain. And then this car completely runs me over. 3 teenagers not paying attention on their phones completely ran over me and left me unconscious underneath their car, and an ambulance in an emergency room to try to make sure I didn't die. The doctors were like, "You're lucky you're not dead." And I sat there with my neck completely in a brace, just pouring tears, not from all the pain from my head and everything, but because I was going to fail, even though I failed at something I wanted to give everything to. And I spent 2 days in the emergency room, and my mother flew down from New York City, where she lives, and she came to see me. I'm 45 years old, but we're always a child of our mothers. I'm a grown man, but my mother came, and and I prayed again for what to do, and they relocated my shoulder, but I could barely use it, and my groin muscle was torn in my left side, so I couldn't use my right leg, my right arm, or my left leg. And then I had these gruesome staples all over the top of my head. They've left me with really big scars on the top of my head now. But and I had to worry about my brain swelling again. But I decided after 2 days in the emergency room, I said, I'm going to try to finish this. 10 days, 160 kilometers a day. I'm going to try. So my mother rented a car, and because of the Guinness rules again, she cannot ride close to me or in front of me. And she also cannot carry anything for me, not even food or water.
Okay,
And
okay,
so
okay.
she rented a car, and she rode about 5 kilometers or 4 kilometers behind me to make sure that if, as I was cycling, if my brain injury caused me to go unconscious and I fell and I just hit my head, I'm in the middle of nowhere, that she would find me and could then bring me to a hospital. Um, and she followed me going like 20 kilometers an hour for 1,600 kilometers behind me while I cycled 160 kilometers a day, which normally took like 10 to 12 hours, but because of my only able to use one arm and one leg, took me about 18 hours every day. So I would cycle like 18 hours from like sunrise until dark into the night till 11 p.m. And then I would get to the hotel, and my mom would be waiting there, and I my injuries, and she would nurse me. She would like tears, and I wouldn't make a noise, but
Uh,
just my I would just be
mhm.
lying flat on my back, and the pain from all the chemicals like the alcohol and stuff on my body, and she would just be nursing me, and I would just be pouring tears and just try to sleep like 4 hours because I would have to wake up to do it again. And that's how those 10 days went. It was like I was this defenseless child, like when I was a baby, an infant. And there was and who was taking care of me when I was completely vulnerable was my mother again. It was very strange. And I'd never experienced that, I guess, since I was a child. And that's how those 10 days went. My mother saw me
Mhm.
push, and and in 10 days I got to the finish of the North American stage, and the next morning on the plane to Hawaii where I closed out the world record. Um, so that was that. That's all the pain and the injury, and it was brutal. And
Yeah.
yeah, including the finale, this last 10 days. But in a way, I see it as a good thing, because all my life I wanted to, I've always been inspired by people who gave everything for some cause, for some person or some purpose. And they did it because they had a great love in their heart. If it was Gandhi or Martin Luther King or anyone, it's like they cared so much about somebody else that they were willing to die for that love. I always admired these people, and yet every time I looked in the mirror, I never saw that kind of a person in me. Base, it's the kind of person I wanted to be, but it's never was the person that I was. And the reality is that in my life, whenever things got
Mhm.
hard, if it was academics, if it was athletics, if it was career, if it was relationships, whenever it got really, really, really hard, I quit. I would always quit. I achieved a lot of success in my
Mhm.
life, in banking, in academia, in the military, but the truth was that I succeeded a lot because of my own talents, because I was gifted with a strong mind and a strong body. But whenever it came to the consciousness and the heart, and it got extremely hard, I would quit.
Mm-hmm.
So I would always get the silver medal instead of the gold medal. I still beat everybody else, but I wasn't the number one. And it was always because of a lack of heart. And that bothered me. I was now in my 40s
Mm-hmm.
and I had never given everything for something that I loved. And it just so happened that this world record was a chance for me to prove to myself that I could be the kind of person that I always wanted to be. And having cycled already all those 6 continents and having gone through all those challenges, I was crossing the United States already saying, I did it. I proved to myself that I could love something enough. I could raise money for this charity, and I could do something noble. And it was getting run over by that car in Texas and almost dying that I that just put the stamp, just affirmed for me once and for all that I was capable of loving something so much that I would be willing to die for it. And that kind of peace, that kind of serenity that comes when
Mm-hmm.
you when one knows that they can love someone else or something else is really wonderful feeling. And I've been searching for it my whole life. And so in a way, getting hit by this car and almost killing me was a way to experience that. And so in a way, I'm grateful that it happened, even if it left me with permanent injuries, even now to this day. um, so yeah, so those are all the
Mm-hmm.
challenges. So,
Oh
mm,
man. Wow. Tense and emotional,
mm,
I would say, even for me to listen it and like, yeah, just like once again, like happy
yeah,
you
me
life,
too.
happy you breathing and like, finish your goal. This is cool stuff. And your mother is
Yeah,
like a hero, like true hero. It's all
a lot of
mothers,
them are.
right? Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, you know what? Also would like to ask you with all this intercontinental experience and like cycling and seeing all these
Mm,
cultures and food and people and generosity and maybe not necessary, maybe some bad
mm.
moments. I'm not sure.
Oh,
Do,
no,
do you
I can
have
hear you.
also same sound as I have now? Yeah. So and yeah, I really would like to have to hear some of your
Mm,
stories. You touched already a little bit of Africa. We can go like start from Africa itself because for me it's totally new world. I never been there. It's like also destination to go. Asia, same for me.
mm,
Many other, I think, like everything for me is like this.
mm.
Yeah, I would like to hear your experience, your cultural touch, your cultural exchange, how you've been again, like as Hawaii man from the island and through
Yeah,
all around
yeah,
the globe.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm glad you
go
brought that
on.
up because I realized as I was finishing all the painful experiences that I hope that's only half the picture. And I was like, oh God, I don't want them to think it was just this horrible experience. Um, in fact, for every painful experience, there was a beautiful one attached to it. So yeah, for sure, there was just as much beauty as there was pain. And in fact, I don't even think you can really separate the two. I think
Mm.
that with that great beauty has pain, like
Right.
something as simple as the nature. It's like yes, it's more comfortable to be inside a house or a car, but then you miss out on the visual. Your eyes get obscured by the windows. You don't experience the wind when the doors are closed. And so the nature is so beautiful, but if you really want to get closer and closer and see more and more beauty, it means being exposed to the pain of heat and cold and wind and fire and ice. And so yeah, so there is no beauty without pain, in my opinion. And so, for all this pain that I was exposed to, it meant that I received so much beauty and love that I don't think anyone could experience without being exposed to that much pain. So, like, for one, is the generosity. I was completely alone crossing all these continents. And it's not like, when you fly in on a plane and then take a train or a bus to a major city where all the infrastructure and the people were there. I spent a very small amount of time in cities because it takes a long time to cycle between them. And so you're alone in nature and you're very vulnerable. You don't have food, you don't have water. There's safety issues even with wild animals and things, and then safety issues with the temperature. Like, is it too hot or cold, or do you have enough water? And so, for all of that, the generosity, the kindness of strangers, is just like, we couch surf, and you'll always see the kindness of strangers. And I love, love, love couch surfing to this day. Um, but it is a different kind of experience where you're in the middle of nowhere or in very small, remote villages where they've never even seen someone with your face before. It's like you're going back 100 years and you're some explorer, and they're like, what are you? And there's no language, and there's no technology, and there's no Wi-Fi, and there's no electricity, and they're it's the first time they ever get to look and touch a person like you, and they're kind, and they have almost nothing, but they give you exactly what you need to survive, and without it you would die. And so the generosity of people across the world is wonderful. The two places that I experienced anecdotally the most kindness was Indonesia, and the entire continent, or the 8 countries I crossed in Africa. The people were just exceptional. Coincidentally or not, these are also the poorest places that I cycled through. So I don't know what the connection is, but it doesn't matter.
Mm.
The people were so giving, so and
Mhm.
so one of the incredibly beautiful things to experience in traveling was the kindness of others, the love, the unconditional love, the giving, the gifting, that I experienced, uh, all across the world. Um, and I could speak highly of, yeah, everywhere. You had mentioned about any bad experiences. I actually had zero bad experiences. Not one time. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with my personal experience
Mhm.
traveling, and common sense, and respecting cultures and people to not do something stupid. But in general, but I had, regardless, I had zero bad experiences with people and their cultures. I'm also very open-minded, so I eat everything. I say no to nothing. And so, there's no bad cultural experience for me. I can appreciate any kind of food, music, art, literature, philosophy, ideas, and be open and respectful to it. So I had no bad cultural experiences, no bad interactions. Um, some differences, I would say, is, like I said, when I got to developed regions, uh, like say Thailand or Europe in general, or the United States, there tends to be more of a separation between people. That's not a bad thing. A bad thing is someone doing something negative to you, but it does feel a less it's less enjoyable when you cycle through Africa, for instance, and everybody on the side of the road that sees you, every single person, even a 5-year-old child, will stop as you're moving past them, look you in the eyes, and say hello, hello, welcome, and you're just like, hello. But then it happens 10,000 times because nobody has cars and everyone's walking down the roads, and you're on the bicycle the whole time. So everyone's like, hello, mister, hello, mister, hello, mister, hello, mister. And they stop and they look you in the eyes and they smile and they say, hello, mister. And all you have to say is hello back. And they don't want anything from you. It's almost just like manners. And then, unfortunately, to go to like the United States and Europe, parts of Europe, and you just pass somebody and you're passing them. You're only 1 meter away. They know you're there. And instead you can see the eyes slightly look down and away and don't do anything. And it's okay. Like I said, they're not hurting me, but it's a missed, I would say, at best, it's a missed opportunity to have what is very natural between human beings, which is a connection. We are social beings, we're social animals. We derive peace and happiness through interacting with each other. And so, for whatever reason, these countries, these developed countries, have kind of moved away from human, from physical or spatial human interaction, and it just makes it a little harder to live life. And so in these places like I described in Indonesia and Southeast Asia in general, um, or Africa there, or even South America, there's a lot more of a human connection, and it's just an added bonus. Um, what other things from culture? Well, food. We can talk food. Southeast Asia has amazing food, especially if you eat spicy, and it's so cheap. So this is not anything you can find on any TikTok travelers things, but I just can't emphasize it enough. If you like good food, if you can eat spicy, you can have entire meals there for €3, like a giant plate of seafood and meat and everything, and it's just so cheap. It's so delicious, and it's so yeah, cheap, affordable. And so, Southeast Asia is an excellent place to travel because everything is cheap. In fact, even accommodations, you can get a private hotel room, a nice one for like €10. You get food for €3. It's so cheap, and the quality is good, and the region is very safe. And so it's just an excellent place to travel. The people are friendly. Um, Indonesia is an exception though because of its poverty. It's a very poor place. The people are the nicest. It's the most poor though. But if you're traveling in the other parts, like the more popular tourist sites like Malaysia or Thailand or Vietnam, you have great food, great infrastructure, like hotels and cleanliness, and it's safe. So that's an excellent place to travel. Central Asia, like when I went through Kazakhstan and stuff, I liked it. It was interesting. It was like a mix of Asian and Russian or Slavic culture. So the people are kind of a little more cold or unfriendly, but the moment you break the barrier, oh my God, these people, you might as well have married one of their daughters because you are family, and you feel it in your heart. Like you feel like we are blood. You don't know how it happened, but you just have to break that wall. There's a wall there. They look at you and they're like nothing, just like if you were in Russia or the Ukraine or something. But God, it's so easy to break the wall. And when you do, it's even more genuine than the friendliness of like Southeast Asia or Africa. That's more of a politeness, of friendliness. But in like places like Central Asia stuff, it is like a genuine love that they will give you. And I loved it. And it had a nice blend of Slavic culture and
Mhm.
Asian culture. I actually thought it was good. Tough, tough people, tough climate, but very warm houses and warm hearts. So that was cool. I personally I'm also kind of tough. I lived in New York City
Mhm.
for like 17 years. So I kind of can be a tough personality. So I was okay with it. I was but the people were super kind, like genuinely kind. Um, what else? Europe, amazing
I
infrastructure,
see.
very safe for cycling relative to Southeast Asia and Europe are the best, safest places for cycling. Europe has amazing infrastructure, amazing food, a very educated population that is just super important. I mean, I'm from the United States, so I can say this. My people tend to be really stupid in general, and it's very disappointing because it's personal. This is yeah, there's just a lack
In which,
of education,
yeah,
and that's not to blame the people. It's more about the infrastructure. We just have very poor public education
yeah.
system, and it's very poorly funded, and so there's not enough of
Mm.
resources or high quality teachers to teach the population, and so the population is quite ignorant. And and like I said, I can say that because I am an American. I can critique my own country because it's my family, it's my people. And on top of that, I was in the military. I served, I was willing to die for this country. So I had, if I want to say something negative, I can say something. Um, so yeah, so it's very disappointing. But to go back to the positive, Europe is outstanding. Probably the most educated people when it comes to culture and history and politics and society that I've experienced around the world, and that leads to more enlightened, harmonious conversations and understandings. And of course, I know Europe has its problems too, but it's still doing better than a lot of the places I saw around the world. So Europe had great food and enlightened population relative to the rest of the world, and great infrastructure and safety. Um, and then South America. Well, my I was born in the U.S., but both my parents are immigrants from Colombia, and so my blood and my bones and my culture is also Colombian. So I don't know if I'm biased, but the Latin people, very warm, very friendly, very social. There, nobody puts, in my opinion, once again, maybe biased, but nobody throws a better party than Latinos. Latinos are the best parties. They've got the best music. They love to dance. Everything is a celebration. So, so nothing, so you go to Latin America and you just find these warm, beautiful, social, celebration focused people, or it's easy to find. Of course, Latin America has its own problems and its own politics, but you can definitely find a great party and a good time and kind people all over Latin America. So that's what they offer. They have good food too, good amazing nature. And then, yeah, last that leaves. Oh, I left out Australia. Australia has a lot of beauty and really down to earth people, like simple, honest, hardworking people, is what I saw. And they also have their problems too with their indigenous population. No place is perfect, but what I encountered were a lot of what they call the salt of the earth kind of people, like just very simple, down to earth, honest, hardworking people is what I experienced cycling across the whole continent from Sydney to Perth. They have this beautiful area called the Nullarbor Plain. That is this giant expanse of 1,000 kilometers of desert right on the edge of the cliffs that drop into the ocean. It's completely uninhabited, so there's no food or water for 1,000 kilometers, except for a few road houses like gas stations. And so if somebody's going to cycle it or walk it, they have to be very prepared to carry like enough food and water for many, many days, or they will get into very serious trouble, because there's nothing. But it's also very beautiful. Um, so Australia, good people, beautiful nature. And then last is my country, the United States or North America. Well, I've already said some stuff. Statistically, it is for cyclists, it's the most dangerous place. It's we have a very aggressive car culture that I really hope and advocate. I'm trying to change in my work here in Hawaii, but we have a very aggressive, entitled car culture that makes it very dangerous for pedestrians or cyclists. Um, there is the infrastructure. We have a lot of money, so there are good roads and you can find healthy food to travel, but it is expensive, like kind of like Europe relative to the rest of the world. It is more expensive to find food and accommodations, and the roads are more dangerous. It is where I almost died. Not a coincidence, maybe. And but the people, you can find good people as well, just like everywhere. But I have to say I enjoyed many other parts of the world, and I'm actually I feel hesitant to recommend cycling in the U.S. because I know statistically how dangerous it is, and I now have personal experience, and I just would hate to like strongly encourage someone to cycle the US and something happen. I feel like I would have some responsibility. So I don't want to discourage anyone, but at the same time, I'm
Right.
not going to encourage the way that I did Europe or Southeast Asia. Um, um,
Mhm.
so yeah, so yeah, that would be kind of culture, people, stuff like that. Hmm.
I see, I see. You touch a little bit of the food, and you also
Hmm.
mentioned that you eat pretty much everything. So, from all of the continents and countries, like
Yeah,
what is the weirdest maybe, and at the same
yeah,
time the most delicious? Like can be anything. Like, but I'm pretty sure you
you're
try maybe
right.
some horse, for
Yeah,
example, in Kazakhstan. Maybe not. I'm not sure.
yeah,
But like for
yeah.
example, you know what I mean, right? Like, so do you have?
I
Open
Well,
your
I
list
wish
of
I
your
could talk about
interesting
the
meals.
15 years of backpacking around the world, like through couch surfing and stuff. Because there, I've been to over 100 countries, and yeah, I eat everything. I also can tolerate really high spice levels, and I have a really huge sweet tooth. I love sweets, so from extreme spicy to very sweet, and I eat everything. On this trip, yes, maybe the most unusual thing was to eat horse in Kazakhstan. Um, I have eaten horse though before in Japan. In fact, in Japan, I ate raw horse, so horse sashimi. So, yeah. So they even have that in Japan. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So you can eat horse, but they even have it raw,
oh,
just like they have raw everything. If you like. Yeah. But as
yes.
far as this trip in these, I think it was 30 countries or something. Maybe the most unusual thing I think for other people would have been the horse. Um, in Indonesia, because it is quite poor, you have to be careful about food poisoning, which I did get. And so I was eating, food that, they were like cooking the meat on the skewers and stuff. But the thing is, they keep all the raw meat because it's a very poor country, so they don't have much electricity, so they don't have much refrigeration. So a lot of the food is left in room temperature. And then what they expect is that when you cook it over the fire, that the meat will kill, or the fire will kill a lot of the bacteria. And if you're accustomed to that food, probably your
Mhm.
gut stomach is strong enough to handle some of the bacteria that remains even after the fire. But for someone that's not accustomed to it, it meant getting sick. And so sometimes going up to a food stall and seeing all this raw meat just in a container on with no refrigeration and going, oh God, I'll have that and that, and they just take it and they cook it and you're just like, oh, the risk. um that was scary. Or even though it wasn't a dish, it was just beef or chicken, but it was still very risk taking to want to eat it. But otherwise, I mean, in Southeast Asia, I always told the staff, I said, give me the spiciest. And they were like, are you sure you're not from here? And I was like, give it to me. I was like, don't be shy, don't hide, give it to me. And they're like, okay, no foreigner ever asks for this. And I would sit there and I was eating this really spicy noodles and rice dishes, and they would be staring at me, and they go, wow, he's really eating it. And I'm like, yes, 15 years of eating extremely spicy food, from Mexico to Korea to India. I can handle it. So, um, yeah, what else? What else? Anything in Europe that was strange? I don't think so. I don't think so. I love the food in
Really?
Poland. Food in Poland's good. Heavy. Oh,
And
sweet.
what about the sweet? Like, what the
Okay, so
like? What is the
if we talk
nicest
about all
sweet
my
you try?
travels, I've eaten delicate sweets everywhere. No, no, let's
You
let's
can
stick on the
mention
spicy thing.
anything. Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
the
No
one
problem.
sweet that stands out more than anything
Sure.
was a very, very simple ice popsicle that was just ice with like a pink sugar, poured over it, like on a stick. So it's super, super simple, right? There's
Okay.
no anything. It's just ice, flavored ice
Yeah.
on a popsicle stick that I found when I was cycling through Botswana. I stopped, and this was like this 45-degree desert, and I had been in Africa for like over a month, pushing through this insane heat. Like it was so hot that as I was cycling the road, one day I realized, looking at the side of the road, there's a tree every like 300 kilometers, one tree standing. And under that tree were all the animals, cows, goats. They would, and every tree I pass, every 30 seconds I pass a tree. All the animals are hiding under the tree. And I look at the animals and they're looking at me like, why is he out under the sun? And I'm looking at them going, I wish I was under the tree. And I said, if I can't keep moving, if I stand under the tree, I have to keep moving. So I have to be killing myself under this heat. But I was looking at the animals and thinking, they're smarter than me. They know what to do. And they were just staring at me like, what are you doing? What is that animal outside? And so after being exposed to such extreme heat, one day I stopped at this gas station or little convenience store to buy some bread to have for dinner. And I found this freezer and it had these pink ice popsicles, no milk, nothing, just this ice water. And I bit into that. It was so cold and so sweet. And I sat there in this little convenience store with this old black woman there, and I just ate this popsicle under the brew, and it was so good. It was so good. And I asked her, I said, "Can I have another?" And she was like, "Of course, have as many as you want." And I ate like three of them, sitting on this little plastic bucket under the inside the store, outside of the heat, and it was the most delicious sweet I had for my whole 9 months across all continents because I needed that cold and that sugar because I was so tired and so dehydrated and so hot. And that's the thing I remember the most. Best sweet. Otherwise, objectively, the best sweets were definitely in Europe. Let's just put that out there in general. The best, yeah, of course. I can't remember off the top of my head,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
really.
know Europe. The best gelato, best pastries, without a doubt. And I found them whenever I could. I found
Uh,
great gelato everywhere. Even to this day, to this day, I say 24 countries in Europe, the best gelato that I had was this place in Warsaw. It was the best gelato I had. I said that even in Italy and upset all the Italians. I said the single best place that I ever tasted
right?
gelato was this place. And if you look at the place reviews on Google, this place in Warsaw, it's like 10,000 reviews, five
Yeah.
stars straight. It's this really great place. But
Oh.
it was the best place I had gelato, even better than any single place I had it in, even Italy. So, good sweets everywhere,
Mm.
or all over Europe. But yeah, best sweet is
Hmm.
Africa, Botswana, simple sugar ice pop, in the middle of the desert. Uh, yeah.
Little desert, sweet, sweet, nice, man. And you know what? Like you touch some moment of like, let's say, your personal challenge of like you being the best and so on. How is like in this trip? Maybe not also necessarily this trip, but let's say one of your bicycle trip. And again, I know that you suffer a lot. Like even back
Mm,
then when you've been my guest here, you also shared me the story of like how you was crossing Alps, for instance. Yeah, like crying and
yeah.
screaming, still telling everybody this story. And but what I'm really interested, like, and also in the beginning of podcast, you touch it. The let's say this
Mm,
personal growth, spiritual growth inside you, like it's it's not even I'm asking like any story or something, but maybe some observation what you had during your
mm,
again this a lot of self time. You was all the time with yourself. Again, you very nicely mentioned that like without technology, without like gears and different things, you can focus more on you, on nature, on this connection, and so on.
mm.
Can you maybe open it a little bit from your perspective and how you faced it, and maybe you had some like boom, like I don't know how it's happened with different people, different actions. However, it's really interesting for me to
Yeah.
hear some of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
spiritually and day to day. Yeah, I spent the majority of my time alone. Um, this would with this third trip, since this wasn't my first one, it's my third. I already knew when I was gonna, getting on the plane to start to fly to Australia, that this whole experience was going to be a very meditative experience. I already knew that because I had done these two other rides before, and I was excited about that. I think with cycle touring, for instance, there there are two ways to approach it. It can either be a spiritual journey or it can be a social one. Not that it has to only be these two, but in general, you can split in two. The social one is because a lot
Hmm.
of people cycle tour as a couple or as a team. They go as a group, and when you do that, You're cycling together, you're camping together, you're talking stories, you're playing games, you're having fun. It's a social experience, and that's very nice as well. In fact, I kind of wish I would have that um, someday. The other one is strictly a spiritual one because you're alone, and what is there to do but to be alone with your thoughts and your feelings and your breath, and you don't really have a choice. Um, Being alone, that spiritual process, depending on where you are, maturity wise, it can be either a very painful experience or it can be a very rewarding or positive experience. It really depends on where the individual is. Um, you have an issue like in the United States, we have a type of punishment called solitary confinement, where if when you're in jail and you misbehave, they lock you in a small room by yourself. This is considered by humanitarian law and the United Nations as an act of torture. But the United States considers it a valid form of punishment or correction. One of the few countries that does it. So, what is it though? It is you're just locked in a room in a steel box with no light, no windows, no comfort, and you sleep on a concrete floor in darkness, and you stay there for many, many days or weeks or sometimes even months with no sunlight or human connection. And this really tortures a person. Like I said, the UN thinks of it as an act of torture, even though nobody's hitting you or yelling at you or doing anything to you. But it's really painful. And I think it's because we're social beings again. It is not natural to be that isolated. So it causes a lot of pain. But on the other side, though, you can take like a Buddhist monk, and a monk will go into a monastery and will put themselves in a small concrete room with no light, no windows, no people, no communication, and stay for weeks or months as well. So, what's the difference? I think the difference is when you're alone, truly, truly alone, without people, without your phone, without a book, without a pencil and a paper, nothing to do, nowhere to distract yourself, no one to interact with, you're left with your own memories and your own thoughts and your own feelings. Depending on where you are as a human being, if you've experienced a lot of suffering, then that's what you're going to be exposed to. And you won't be able to distract yourself with
Mhm.
relationships or with social media. To when the pain of your own memories and thoughts come, you go, oh, I don't want to think about that. Let me call my friends. Let me go drink alcohol. Let me do whatever. So I don't ever have to be alone with my own thoughts and feelings. And that's what I think a lot of people do with their life. And
Exa-
but when you're in these solitary places, you can't run away from yourself. So the person that's in prison, it's probably the case that they didn't have a good life. That's probably why they committed some bad act, at least my opinion. It's a big part of why they did something bad because something bad happened to them when they were very young and things. I believe this. So when you leave them alone, now they're exposed to those memories, that trauma, that abuse, that violence, whatever it was that they experienced. And it's too painful. And so alone, they scream in pain and they suffer. The person who has volunteered, the monk, the Buddhist monk, who has volunteered to go into isolation, once again, nobody forced them. They chose to do this. I think they chose to do it because they probably have grown mentally and emotionally to a point where they can see the benefits, and while they still have work to do on themselves, it's not so much work that they feel overwhelmed. They see the challenge, but it's a reasonable challenge. And so they go, I'm going to commit and work and face my demons and come and try to become a better person. So that's the issue. So when cycling alone, I've already known that I was going to get a taste of this experience, and when I was younger, I wouldn't want this. I would have avoided it because I did grow up as a child with a lot of violence. And I grew up with many problems as a young man because of it. And I had a lot of work to do over the decades. And it involved a lot of meditation, and even now, a lot of therapy to continue to heal and become the kind of person I want to be. Um, so cycling, when I started cycling, I was already in my late 30s, or mid to late 30s. I had already grown enough to where when I set off on my own, I could handle the amount of work that I needed to do on myself. And so over the last like 8 years, I've improved. And when I started on this world trip, I was excited to be alone. And so what that meant was just, and what I do is I meditate. For me, meditating isn't tied to any religion or any kind of supernatural or metaphysical thing. I don't have a, I don't imagine or visualize any gods or beings. I don't see any light or energy coming from anywhere. There's nothing supernatural. Everything is just purely physical. I just examine my physical body, the skin, the bones, the blood, the heart, and as it's moving, and the breath. And I watch it, and I try not to make any judgment or try to change it. I just try to accept it, whatever it is. And that also goes for my thoughts and my feelings. If I'm feeling upset, anxious, angry, jealous, I sad, I don't try to change it. I just try to observe it, to acknowledge that I'm having a bad feeling, and then to go back to to my breath, to let it go, just say that is what I'm feeling. There's nothing wrong or there's nothing good or bad about any thought or feeling. It is what it is. Now go back to the breath. And then I constantly examining the physical body and breath with, and then my mind will wander off into some thought or some feeling. I accept it, I don't try to change it, and I wait for it to go away, and I go back to my breath. That's it. Really simple. But what it is doing is allowing me to understand again this idea of impermanence or change, and this idea of interconnectedness, of everything being connected. Because I realize that when I'm there quietly examining my thoughts and feelings, is that every every thought is attached to a feeling. I have a thought about something, like somebody, I think somebody is trying to hurt me, and then that creates a feeling. I feel anger. And so I realize that the thought and the feeling, but
Hmm.
then I realize that every thought disappears over time. Over time, I realize that my assumption about another person was wrong, or that whatever they're doing to me, they are no longer doing to me because time has passed and we have gone our separate ways. So every thought and feeling is connected, but every thought, it changes, goes away eventually, and thus the feeling also goes away. So every bad thought, every bad feeling eventually disappears and is replaced with a different thought and feeling. That thought or feeling could be positive. It could also be another negative feeling, but it's still a different feeling. And so when I'm intimately connected with my body and my mind, and I see that my breath changes, that my skin and my blood and my heart changes, and that my thoughts and feelings are constantly changing, and that nothing is permanent, it helps me let go of any moment because I know that that moment's also going to change, but I need to experience it in the most simplest and personal and physical of ways to then be able to apply this philosophy in more complicated ways, like when it comes to human relationships, when it comes to romantic love, when it comes to politics, when it comes to all this. Like we're about to have an election here in the US, and we're either going to, and for the, we're either going to elect a tyrant dictator for the next 4 years, or we're not. Not that the alternative is that much better, but it's still, I would say, I would argue a little better. They're both bad in my opinion, but one is a little bit better. The lesser of two evils. Um, but how do you handle such complex issues like national politics and global economics? How do you handle romantic relationships that involve sex and love and jealousy? How do you handle family relationships where there are so many fundamental problems, but there's a deep sense of loyalty and commitment? Like, these are really complicated things, but I think they can be answered by understanding impermanence and interdependence. But that can needs to be understood in a very basic, very simple and personal way first. And then you can build more complex applications on it: politics, family, romantic love, sex, all that from that. So, how does one do that? There's no shortcuts, and nobody can teach it to you. You have to sit there alone. That's it. You can read all the books on Buddhism you want. You can go to church as much as you want and pray to your gods. At the end of the day, you have to be alone and you have to put in the work yourself, which it means sitting quietly, distraction free, and facing all those personal demons and figuring out a way to overcome them, not by fighting them, but actually by accepting them. Um, and this is something I can talk about in theory, sure. It means by no means that I'm an expert. No means am I a guru. I am as fucked up as everyone else. And to be honest, I think in many ways I'm fucked up worse than many people. So I just have an aspiration and I have a belief that there is a way to improve. And I have seen positive results in my life, but yeah, make no
Mhm.
confusion that I'm somehow anything other than a normally flawed human being like everyone else walking down the street. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Man, being honest, I really resonate with this word, like about spending time with yourself. Again, doesn't matter in which way,
Mm,
like everybody choose own way, like running, swimming, bicycle, meditation, praying, anything. But like exactly you
mm,
and you facing you. It's like again, as you gave this example with jail, and they say it's a torture because crap, like you're really facing yourself, and like others, you can walk away, you can run away, you can turn, like I don't know, you can close the door, anything, like you can turn off the phone. But
yeah.
you and you, this is tricky thing. You and your life and thoughts and your thoughts and your thoughts again, like, and this and your actions, and yeah, this is valuable thing. I really not about even belief about things like this, but I know that it's nice. I know that it's nice and it's really valuable, and outcome is really good. Not easy, not necessarily easy, not necessarily positive,
Mm.
but
Yeah, I think
yeah, like
the way
effect
we're
is
living in
definitely
society
nice.
now, like that we have just, you want to say it's in the palm of your hand, your phone. Sometimes I think it's already connected to your hand. You don't even, there's not even a choice, to separate it. But you look at our ancestors and
Yeah,
you go back, not even just 50 years. Forget about 500 or 5,000. 50 years ago, they're still, back then, yeah, life was more simple. We weren't as connected. You really only knew people in your town or in your neighborhood. You weren't very connected. You didn't know what was going on really around the world unless you were reading it in a newspaper. Um, and I think it was easier to spend time alone, or not, and develop a smaller group of deeper relationships. Even I remember, because I'm 45, like I grew up before the internet even. And I just remember playing with my one friend. There was just one, and there was no one else in the world. There was just the one friend, and we spent all summer together, and that was it. We played video games, something like that. But and now, it's like we're so hyper connected, and especially the youngest people, like me when I was 8 years old with one friend, and just the neighborhood, just how far I could go on my feet or with my bicycle, and that was it. And that was my whole world. There was nothing
yeah,
else. And now I
yeah,
look at
yeah.
8 year olds and they have a phone and it's throwing at them everything in the world, and they're losing human connections. Yeah, I think it's really harder than ever to appreciate time alone and time in nature. It's harder than ever. Um, in Actually, let me qualify that.
Hmm.
In
become
Yeah,
an
but
impression.
let me
Yeah,
qualify that
like a small trip.
in developing nations, because when I went to Africa, for instance, all the 8 year olds were extremely social. They walk right up to you and start and look you right in the eyes and start talking to you like an adult. And they had the advanced communication skills. Hey, what are you doing? So how are you? So all this. So what's you're doing? And you're like, am I talking to a child or an adult? But it's because what do they have? They literally live on dirt floors and all they have is rocks to play with, but they have each other. They spend all day alone on that
Hmm.
dirt road, but with 5 or 10 kids, and they grow up interacting. And so it's like why Latin people are good at dancing. It's not because we have something genetic. It's because from the age of 3 years old, our mother is pulling us onto the dance floor and moving us, and we're terrified. We're like, no, mom, don't do it. But by the time we're 15, we've been dancing for 12 years. It's an education, it's a PhD in dancing. And so you go, oh my God, he's only 15 years old. He's a natural. No, he's been dancing for over a decade. So it's the same thing with the children in Africa. Like they're
Exactly.
socialized without the distractions of technology from such a young age that they're so good at it and they're so healthy. And so when I say that the technology and the being alone is so unnatural, it's more than anything for developing nations, Japan, Europe, United States, many parts of the
Hmm.
world don't have that problem, but it's because of a lack of technology, which is connected to issues of poverty, which is another problem. It's a trade-off, one problem for
Yeah.
another. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, I think everyone would benefit from being alone and in nature, but we kind of have to force ourselves to be in that environment. Like even now, it's not you don't have to
Hmm.
go to Africa. It's literally we put our phones down. In my case, I leave the phone at home and then I walk the 10 minutes to the beach because I live in paradise. So my Hawaii is there's a beautiful ocean, but I need to leave the phone here. And can I overcome my fear, which sounds so stupid, but there's a panic when I think about leaving this, having nowhere to look at a map, make a text message, nothing, order food, nothing. Leave the phone and go completely free to the beach and spend an hour on the beach. I know when I get there, when I do it, I will be very happy. But in this moment, can I let go of this thing and go do it? That's the
Hmm.
challenge. The reward is guaranteed,
Hmm.
in my opinion. It's guaranteed. The reward is there. But can I make the hard decision, unnatural decision now and let go of the technology? Same for you. So, yeah.
Indeed. Nice. Well, man, all being said, would like to slowly wrap up. However, after all your trip and all these situations and accidents and goal that you achieved, let's mention it again. What is, let's say, what you consider your biggest achievement in
Mm,
this trip and with this
yeah.
goal, with this
The
award?
two
Sorry.
things that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I'm most proud of is that I was able to prove to myself that I was capable of a great love. You know, the kind of happiness and peace that comes from that realization that I was capable of loving something else, whatever, and everyone they can choose whatever it is, if it's their family, if it's their career, but just to be willing to love
Mm-hmm.
something to so much that you're willing to give everything for it. I had always seen that in movies and seen it in stories of real people, and I always wanted that for myself. And so my biggest achievement is that I could see that in myself. I could prove to myself I was capable of a great love. Um, the biggest lesson to come out of it was the one where I spoke about uh, beauty and pain. That I don't think you can separate the two. That yeah, somebody wants romantic love. They want to fall in love with a beautiful woman or man, but then the moment things get hard, they want to run away or push away from the pain. but there is no way to separate pain from beauty. They're intimately connected. And if you really want to be as intimate as you can with love and beauty, you have to come to terms with that that's going to cause you a great amount of pain and suffering. But it's worth it. It's worth it to feel alive, um, than to be overly protected but never experience that beauty and love in its full potential. So
Hmm.
those two things are the biggest takeaways from this cycling trip.
Nicely said, Jonas. Nicely said. And what are
Mm.
your future plans? How is all
Mm.
going? What are your thoughts? And
Mm.
maybe travel plans,
Yeah.
maybe
So since
bicycle. I don't
back,
know.
two things. One is I'm healing, so I needed to have a surgery to repair my knee, but it was a serious surgery. So when I got back, I actually needed to, after the surgery, I actually need to relearn. I'm relearning now how to walk again. I was in a it was,
Right.
yeah.
So they changed all the knee
So
like completely, or oof. And do you have some
it's like carbon
like
fiber
titanium or
now.
metal thing now?
So, yeah, so I was in
Carbon
a
fiber, crap,
wheelchair for an entire
man.
month. It was a very serious operation, and then I had to, and now the last 3 months, it's learning how to walk, learning how to climb stairs. So the rehabilitation will take about 12 to 18 months, about a year and a half to get back to cycling
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I also made a big sacrifice of my health to for this, and I won't and I will never be 100% the same after this. So but I'm getting older anyway, so I've had a big life. So one thing is this rehabilitation, rebuilding this body, and the other one is, well, when I came back, I actually thought maybe after 45 years and after 100 plus countries and after all the singing, dancing, laughing, and loving around the world, maybe it's time to kind of settle down a bit. And I've always loved Hawaii, and I wanted to build a community here. So, the idea is to spend my time in working for the community, nonprofit advocacy, trying to, because Hawaii, like everywhere else, it's paradise, but it also has its problems. So trying to be a part of the solution and helping out with the
Mm-hmm.
many social issues here. So to get involved with the community, doing social advocacy work, and building relationships and rebuilding my body is kind of the long-term plan. I'm sure because I am as my mom says, a gypsy. I am a nomad. I'm sure I'll probably be on the road at some point. I've been doing it my whole life. I don't know if I can resist the urge. So I'm sure I'll be somewhere in the world doing something, but I'm going to try to stay focused on investing my time here in the community here in Hawaii, and with my personal relationships, and rebuilding this broken body back to something strong again. So
Well, and lastly but not leastly, last but not least, what are your words to some travelers who would like maybe make some big trip, not necessary, maybe even smaller, or like some encouraging words for someone who is listening and don't have enough courage, or maybe some doubts in general for about themselves,
yeah,
about the world, safety, and so
okay,
on.
okay, fair
Many
enough.
people have, yeah.
Some things, because you mentioned it, safety wise, I really think the world is actually vast. I think that human beings are vastly good people. And so the reality is the majority of the world is very safe. It's just that we watch the media, and the media has figured out that it can play on our emotions and our psychology and our primitive states of survival by showing us negative things, and that makes us keep coming back to them, because we do have this evolutionarily
Hmm.
pessimistic mind that's geared for survival. And so you just keep showing your bad things and you will keep staring at it. And so, but it's not reality. The reality is that the vast majority of people in this world are good, and thus the vast amount of the world is safe and it's easy to travel. Of course, there are a couple caveats. One is you have to have common sense, and you have to be open-minded and respectful of other cultures. Of course, if you don't know that, I don't even know why you're traveling. It's like you got to, as they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans. You have to be open-minded and respectful for when you examine cultures that live differently. And if you are open-minded, you will realize that their different way is not necessarily wrong. There are many ways to get to the same conclusion, and that just the way they eat, the music they listen to, the art they produce, even the way they organize society, and is just as valid. It's just as good. It's just if only different. So having common sense and being respectful will keep you out of any of that trouble. I do want to say a special caveat for women travelers. Yes, it is the case that women are going to experience a little more safety issues than men. That's just a fact. It's a patriarchal world, and that's very unfair. And so I want to acknowledge, give credit to women that when they travel, that they will have to be a little more careful. Also, all the women world travelers I found in the world are badass.
Hmm.
They are tough, charismatic, dynamic, energetic. I've always been impressed by solo women travelers because they do overcome more than the men, and it's like diamonds. They get, they're made out of pressure. And so a woman that travels alone is always a badass that I admire and respect. But there is the fact that there is more for them to consider. Um, as far as pursuing your
Hmm.
dreams, that's kind of hard for me because I would just say, just pursue your dreams. It's one life. It's a little cynical or pessimistic to, no, cynical to say, but you're gonna die anyways. It's gonna end anyways. Why not make it a great story? Um, you know, uh, even with all the sacrifices I've made for my experiences in life, I don't have any regrets, right? You have the saying, you only regret the chances or whatever that you didn't take. And I do think that's true. No matter, if it comes to romantic love, falling in love with someone, if it comes to careers, if it comes to travel, like, you do the action, you have the courage, you pursue your dreams, and you do it, and it fails horribly. It sucks, and you have to pay the consequences, but it never feels as bad as if you never took it, and you have to look in the mirror and realize that you were kind of a coward, or you lived in fear. That's a worse punishment than whatever the punishment is, that man or woman rejected you, that career fired you, that journey around the world injured you. It's never, it's the once again the lesser of two evils. Better to pursue your dreams and take the chance, but also it's just follow your heart. Right? If it excites you, just keep dreaming, keep imagining. Eventually, your heart will take over, and you will do it. So just keep pursuing. It'll be a natural thing. Just uh, keep your imagination and curiosity, and keep researching whatever it is that makes your heart excited, and it will happen. That it will happen from there. From there, you will find solutions. You will find ways to overcome challenges. You will find, through your research, through your curiosity, through your passion, you will find ways to overcome, and to finally get you there. And so, yeah, wherever it is, whatever you love. My first love when it came to travel was Japan, and yeah, and I just never let go of my dream and my curiosity and my imagination. And one day I was there, and one day I had this amazing experience, and I even fell in love there, and things happened, and then I went back time and time again, until I deeply understood the culture, and you know So so yeah, no regrets. So just
Sweet. And if some people would like to maybe ask you a question or connect with you or just follow you,
yeah, so I'm on social
where they can
media,
find you.
Facebook, Instagram, mostly under Charity Bicycle. I'm also building a website now, which would be charitybicycle.org, that will document the 3 cycling trips, um, and they could find me there, or just or yeah, on social media, Charity Bicycle, or my name, Douglas Concha. And yeah, if they have any travel questions, I think I have a lot of experience traveling, backpacking around the world, couch surfing, and for sure any cycling or adventure tourism. I've already, through the blood, sweat, and tears, I've accumulated a lot of knowledge on how to travel in that way as well. Um, I'm also very passionate about history, politics, and philosophy. So if they want to talk about that, I'm very open as well. So yeah, I'm open to any conversations about any of that.
Cool. Yeah, I will put links in description also to the episode, and if the
Yeah,
video will appear the way how we try
that
now,
would be.
it will be also under somewhere here. Well, man, yeah, really, really amazing and man,
Mm,
thoughtful conversation. To be honest. And I'm really happy you achieved what you
mm.
wanted, what you tried, and you did it. Many,
Thank
many
you.
huge respect and many congratulations. I'm really happy that, like, yeah, definitely you
Mm.
need to rehabilitate and come back to your normal daily
What?
healthy life. However,
Yeah.
still very
Mm.
happy that, like, it could be worse.
Oh.
Again, we always can say shit could be worse.
Well,
You're still working even though you're learning.
yeah.
Really happy for that. And yeah,
Actually,
many thanks
actually,
for
let
also
me say one
being
last
here,
thing in regards to
joining
that.
me.
Uh, Nobody
Sure,
does
sure,
anything
absolutely.
alone.
Go on.
We succeed or we fail because of the support or lack of support of others. I truly believe that. I have a world record, but the reality is that hundreds of people
Mm-hmm.
across the world share that victory with me. It's just their name isn't, on the trophy, but they're all in my heart and in my mind. And there's no way to be
Mm-hmm.
honest except to acknowledge that nobody does anything alone. So even we're talking right now. Why?
Yeah.
Because you offered to open your home to me and to provide me shelter when I was doing my trip around Europe. That's why we're talking now. And and if that Europe trip didn't succeed with the love
Yeah.
and support of people like you, the world trip wouldn't have happened. So, we're talking now because of, and I just want to thank you for your support. Thank you very much. And thank you for this podcast, an opportunity to speak
Yeah.
on your
Thank you,
podcast.
Douglas. Perfect.
Mm,
Yeah, really happy to hear you.
thank
Cool,
you.
man. All right, then. Have an amazing day, rest of the day, and people, all who is listening and joining for other episode,
All right.
we'll be happy to see you there.
Thank you,
And
buddy.
so,
You too. Keep
good
doing you.
travel, safe travels. Yeah. Cool, man. Yeah. Bye. Bye. Bye.